So I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is our fifth and final webinar that we have in honor of National Pet Week. And today, this is such a special treat for us because we have our very, very dear friend, Ellen Zangla, professional pet photographer, here to talk to us about how to take great photos of our pets at home. So some tips and techniques for that. Ellen has really been with Woofies in the Woofies family for the last 9 years. And for the last 5 years, she's been taking pictures at our Paws and Claws event, which is a charity event that we hold in November every year. She takes beautiful photos and has a very special technique in how to get your dog's best picture. So we can't wait to hear from her today. We're very excited. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen, and I just want to remind everyone to go ahead and mute your microphones so that we can hear Ellen clearly as she's speaking. And with that, Ellen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle, and thanks to Woofies, excuse me, for hosting this. I appreciate it. It's really fun. I absolutely love what I do. So for me to be able to talk about ways that everybody can get better photos of their pets is just, it's really fun for me. And anybody who knows me knows how much I love my pets. I've got 6. I have 2 dogs and 4 cats, and they truly are family members. And I think that everybody should have amazing photos of their family members. So I'm happy to share anything I can with you. And like Michelle said, feel free to ask questions. You can reach out to me afterwards as well if you have any. Most of what I'm talking about today applies to cats as well as dogs. I think I wanted to keep this kind of more conversational and not have it be like a gigantic slideshow. So I do have photos to illustrate what I'm talking about. When Michelle and I were talking about it, I said, can I show photos? Because it's kind of like, if you don't, it's kind of like trying to describe a circular staircase without using your hands, right? I feel like it's super important. So I am going to show photos, and like I said, most everything will apply to cats as well as dogs, but the photos are all dogs. So Michelle, do I need to do anything here?
So yes, on the bottom, there's a button for share screen.
Okay.
Yep. And then you
can
click on that and you can start sharing your over screen.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to share about 10, kind of give or take 10 tips for taking better photos of your pets. And none of these are camera specific. So I consider this to be a phone. I know a lot of people consider it to be a camera, and I definitely do use it for snapshots and for, if I'm around the house and somebody's doing something cute. But for me, I always use my camera, and I pretty much always use some type of off-camera lighting. But everything that I'm talking about today, you can do with your camera. I mean, you can do with your phone, and you can do without lights. So I just want it to be simple and hopefully really helpful. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is, let me just get my screen share. Okay. Okay, so can everybody see the photo that's up of the German Shepherd?
Yes.
And the Yorkie. Okay, so one thing that's really important when you're taking photos is to look for even lighting. So this is, these 2 dogs were in, as you can probably tell, shade. There's no kind of patchy light, so you don't see any bright spots. And that's particularly important when you're photographing dark dogs, like black dogs. A lot of people say that their black dogs or cats end up looking like big black blobs. And if you have uneven lighting, like really bright areas, your camera has a really hard time kind of trying to make the lighting correct for the bright areas as well as the dark areas. So this photo of Bear and Teddy, they're actually Woofie's clients, and Bear's mom is a friend of mine. Bear's and Teddy's mom is a friend of mine, I should say. But this is just done in just really even light. I actually didn't use off-camera lighting in this photo, and you can see You can see all the detail in Bear's fur, and you can see that they have good light in their eyes. And so the other thing that I did here was I also had them kind of face the sun. So one of the things that you're looking for is you want to have great light in their eyes. And if you see, when I zoom in, you can see that Bear has really good light in his eyes because, and so does Teddy, because they're facing the direction of the light source. So they're in what we call open shade. And so open shade basically means they're protected from the direct sun, but they're kind of facing in the direction of the light source. So the other thing that's kind of really important from a lighting perspective is thinking about the time of day. So noon, a lot of people think when it's really bright outside that that's a good time to take photos, and it's really not. It creates really harsh shadows. Noon today actually would be, looking out my window, noon today actually would be good. It's really overcast, but generally you want to try to avoid really bright light. If you are out in really bright light, so if you're out at noon and you want to do something, put your dog in the shade and have them look towards the sun. The other thing, so this is another photo taken. That's actually the exact same location. It was a class that I taught for Canon on photography, and it was not about lighting. But here's an example of a dog that has a lot of white, and you can see that that same lighting works really well for him. A lot of people think that black is a challenge, and black is a challenge, but white is also a challenge. And you notice that you can see kind of all the detail in his fur. None of his fur is like super bright, and that's because he's just in nice even light. And then the other one I wanted to show, and this is Mandy, and Mandy's mom, Tanya, owns the Woofie's Reston Herndon franchise. But you can see that what I had Mandy do is I had her run towards the light, because when she runs towards the light, it puts, towards the sun, it puts light in her eyes. So again, that, what we say is if they don't have light in their eyes look kind of dead. And when they have that just sparkle, it makes the whole photo basically look alive. So the next thing I want to talk about is getting a dog's attention. And there's lots of different ways you can get a dog's attention. I usually make noises, and if anybody's ever had a photo shoot with me or been to a fundraiser that I do with Woofies, I have like a whole collection of noisemakers. But you can just make noises with your mouth. So sometimes I will often say that I'm kind of embarrassed to know me sometimes because I make really weird sounds. But what you're trying to do is make an unusual noise to get a dog's attention. So you can just do something like, and to see if the dog will look at you. The key kind of thing with that is you want to be ready to take the photo. So there's no point in making a sound to get a dog to look at you if you're not ready to take the shot. And I'll see like a lot of people do that. They'll be like making sounds, but they don't have their camera ready or they don't have their phone ready. So make sure you have everything the way you want it before you make a noise. And also make the noise in the direction that you want the dog to look. So for example, this dog, I'm making a sound, and this is Morgan, and she's looking right at me. In the next photo, because I think profiles are actually really cool, and this is actually not a photoshopped image. This dog I could not believe how long she stayed on the tricycle. Anyway, but she's looking right at her mom. Her mom was talking to her. So think about kind of what you want. And if you're taking photos with somebody, so just say it's you and a friend or you and your, your spouse, if you want the dog to look at you and the person kind of with you is making a sound, then the dog is going to look towards that sound. So just kind of think about where you want the dog to look. For cats, what I find to be really effective is anything visual. Cats tend to not respond to noise as well. But, the feather toys that you play with them with, or just anything like that will get their attention. The other thing that you can use to get dogs' attention is if they have a favorite toy and you can like hold it above, your camera or your phone. You can hold a treat there. Dogs also will respond to visual things. So sometimes if you like throw grass up in the air. Somebody told me that. I thought it was a horse trick, I guess, but it works for dogs as well. And when you're doing something, if it's working, you don't have to keep doing it. So if you make a sound, right? So if you go, you have a squeaky toy, that's probably the easiest example. If the dog is looking at you, don't keep squeaking, because then the dog is going to tune that out. So you squeak it once. If they're looking, as long as they keep looking, then you're done. And vary up the sounds, because they'll get kind of tired of hearing the same sound over and over. So, so being ready and just kind of figuring out the best way, and your dog, what's the best way to get their attention. I think I saw Nancy on this call, and I know Nancy's dogs are very toy focused, and I know when Nancy's come to Paws and Claws, she's kind of brought one of the toys, and that's a great way to get their attention. So the other thing, this shouldn't be here, sorry, that was out of order. That was Lola when she was a puppy. The other thing is to get closer. Like, a lot of people will include a lot of extraneous elements in their photos. And so it depends kind of what your photo is about. So is it about the dog, or do you want to include the environment? And these are Amy's dogs. And this was taken at, oh my gosh, the name just flew out of my head.
Stone Tower.
Thank you. Stone Tower Winery. Thank you, Amy. And so we wanted to kind of show the environment here. The truck is really cool. You can kind of see that it's a winery. So think about what you're trying to do. Is the environment relevant, right? Again, this was, a couple of these photos were taken for the book I did last year. So these are my friend Christy's dogs, and she got us into the Redskins training facility. Well, part of the story here is the training facility, like kind of where we are. So think about the elements, right? This is actually another Woofie's client. This is Olive. And Olive's mom and dad just love, what's not to love about that car? But that kind of adds to the story. So you're including part of the environment, or you're including something that's important to you. So here, the environment's not really that important, right? It's just you're trying to get a beautiful portrait of the dog. And in these, you're using what's in it to kind of help tell the story. The other thing, and this is Olive again, and I wanted to give a different example, getting down on the animal's level. So a lot of people will take photos, and they'll take it from the way that they look, the way that they see the pet, right? And a lot of times we're looking down on our pets, right? That's just, we're generally taller than them. But when you get down on their level, then what you're doing is you're kind of better able to show their body. And it's just, I find it just is a kind of a more flattering photo. It kind of puts more emphasis on their whole body and not really just their head, but you also kind of get to see more of their body. The other thing that I like to do is I like to elevate small dogs. And so, because it gives them kind of more presence, and it also puts them kind of more in the environment. So if I had just photographed this dog in the grass, you wouldn't really be able to necessarily see, you'd see kind of a lot of grass, but it wouldn't be as much about the dog. And so like smaller dogs or puppies, it just kind of adds a different level of interest as well. And so you're not just kind of, photographing down on the dog, or just kind of photographing him with, like maybe the grass or the sidewalk or something. It just kind of brings him up. And the other thing, when you kind of get down, so getting down on their level, the other thing I like to do a lot is I like to shoot at low angles. And the reason I do this is kind of twofold. It makes the dogs look kind of more regal. And the example that I, excuse me, sorry, the example that I always give is when you want, football, anybody who knows me, football and NFL in my house is 24/7, right? And so we watch a lot of football. And when you want to make something bigger, you shoot at it from a low angle. If you want to make something look smaller, you shoot from a higher angle, so you would be above the subject. Well, I like photographing animals from a slightly lower angle because it gives them a little more presence, right? But the other thing that I did here, So this is Kira, another Woofie's client, I think. Sarah grooms Kira. But if I had shot this from the same angle as Kira, I wouldn't have been able to include the tree in the photo. It would have been the trunk of the tree, but you wouldn't have been able to see all the flowers, and that's really important. So when you get down low, then you can include other elements. So that's kind of something else to think about. I had a client over a couple of weeks ago, and it was also a cherry blossom, a cherry tree was blooming. And I said, oh, I'd love to photograph Dega in front of the cherry tree. And she said to me, well, aren't you just gonna see the, oh my God, I cannot talk today. Aren't you just gonna see the, not, the trunk? Thank you, Michelle. Oh my God, sorry, I don't know why. Getting old, everything flies out of my head. Aren't you just gonna see the trunk? And I said, well, not from this angle. And what I did was I lay down in the grass and I left him low, and it took everything out of the background. So it's a very similar photo to this, except he was lying in the grass. So that's kind of another thing too, when you're taking a photo, kind of look at what's behind you. If you change your angle, get by maybe stepping to the right or to the left, or getting a little bit lower. And I tend to do the lower one a lot because dogs are smaller. And so it just kind of brings more interesting elements into the photo. Including their favorite toy. So sometimes just kind of thinking about like what do you want to show, and if your dog has like a favorite ball or a favorite stuffed animal, it's just kind of thinking about including that, because it's just something that's really personal to you or personal to them. Thinking about also like photographing in places that are meaningful. So if your dog always lies, for example, on your front porch, and you include then you photograph him on your front porch with the door in the background, then that also will, it's just something that's meaningful. Like it just kind of adds personal meaning to the photo. So think about, like do everything deliberately. So yeah, if your dog's just doing something cute in the house, then just kind of take that photo. But if you're trying to create something, think about what you're trying to create and what you want to include. So, and document their growth. So this is a puppy that I photographed. I do something called a Watch Me Grow plan, where I photograph puppies basically over kind of the course of their first year of life. And so it's 3 shoots, and this is Rocco. And in the first photo, Rocco was probably like 12 weeks old, then he's 6 months old, and then he's about a year. And so if you really want to be able to show their growth, then the best way to do that is to photograph them in the same location at the same angle each time. Because when you do that, you can really see kind of how much they've grown. If you're changing up your angles, or if you're changing the location, obviously you'll still be able to see it. But this to me kind of really illustrates how much he grew, because you have something like, you have a frame of reference. And I just wanted to go back to that photo of Lola, which is here. This is kind of another way to show a frame of reference. So this is Lola when she was, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 weeks old. And this, as you heard me say earlier, has a lot of meaning, because football in my house is important, right? And so to photograph her with a football is meaningful to us. We know what the size of a football is, how big a football is. And so you can kind of see, it gives you a sense of scale for Lola. Without the football there, then you really don't have a sense of scale. So you can kind of see how big she is. And I did this photo kind of multiple times as she got bigger. And I had to tell you, it was astonishing. When I went back and I looked like 2 months later, because we see them every day, so we don't see like how quickly they grow. And then I went back for like in 2 months, I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how big she's gotten. So, and then the other thing I would just say is, and I think all of us probably do this, is photograph them regularly. And so we have our phones with us all the time. And so it's great to just be able to keep taking photos. Unfortunately, we all know that if everything goes according to plan, and this is a little morbid, but we'll outlive them, which is better than the alternative. And so it's just great that we have like so many photos that we can, you know, look back on and love. And it's just great to have them kind of as we go along anyway, because they'll make you smile and you'll be able to document different stages of their life and just kind of capture different memories. So I did have one other thing that I meant to mention earlier that, and I'm going to take my screen share off. I'm going to go back to Michelle. Hang on, I have to do Michelle as host. There she is. More. Okay. Okay. So some people will say that they can't get their dogs to look at the camera. And so one of the things that I think would be really helpful for doing that is, it doesn't even matter if you're really taking a picture, but start rewarding them whenever they look at your phone. So hold your phone up, and as soon as you're holding it up, just give them a treat so that they start to associate the phone coming out with a treat. And I think that that will help them to start looking at the camera. I think they just get so used to having their photo taken that they start to tune things out. And so that's something that will hopefully get them excited about looking at you again. So that's it for my kind of overview. And I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle.
Thank you, Ellen. That was awesome. And I love seeing those pictures. I'm sure everybody did. I think probably the favorite was the little Westie on the bicycle.
I know how cute, right?
I mean, that was really adorable. I wonder if you, as we're talking, if you could find some maybe photos of cats that you've taken. Is that possible?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
I'm curious, we have some questions from people about how to get cats to, I mean, you did address that with the toys, but as we all know, cats are a little bit of a different animal, you know, cliche.
Yes. So
when it comes to taking photos, they're not as obedient as dogs generally. So I wondered if you could give us like a little bit more insight with that. But then speaking about using props, if someone were to, you know, use props in their photo shoot with their dog, are there any props that you would recommend? Things that seem to work better than others?
So when you say props, do you mean like toys or things that they sit on?
Right,
Or
they sit on?
okay,
Yeah.
sure. So I'm going to, because I can't multitask, I will pull up some cat photos. So a couple things. So I feel like choosing props that you like, right? So for me, I kind of like rustic, right? So I have some old, like I have some kind of older chairs that those work. A lot of times if you put a dog on a chair, it will kind of help contain them, especially puppies or smaller dogs. They might not want to jump off. So apple crates, things that are kind of stable as well. So things that are kind of roomy enough for them to sit on. If your dog can do it, like a cool shot is to have your dog put his or her paws up on something, and then you kind of do it at an angle so you can see their body. I've turned like big flower pots upside down and had dogs sit on that. They can also be used to contain smaller dogs. So you could do, I had a Whippet puppy come over a couple of weeks ago, and they're pretty agile, so he didn't stay contained for long. But we put him in a flower pot, and it helped kind of contain him briefly. And then what was super cool was he just sat there and he did this with his paws over the side of the pot. That was pretty awesome. So those can be good props. So I would say anything that's level, anything that you think is interesting. I obviously buy stuff because I use them for my shoots. I have an old antique tricycle that I use. You saw that, right? Most dogs actually cannot sit on that, but just having them kind of in front of it. And for me, it's I like it because it's kind of rustic. And then my mother-in-law, so my husband is 50. My mother-in-law called me like last year and she said, "Hey, I have Mario's old wagon from when he was a kid. Do you want it?" I'm like, yes. So, because it's cool, it's interesting. and it contains it helps contain the animal. The other thing I would say too is just kind of think about your props, and you don't necessarily want something that's either really busy or like really strong. So you wouldn't want like a very strong like floral pattern chair, because it's going to compete with what you're photographing.
Great, thank you. We have a question from someone asking about photographing multiple dogs. And if you have any tips for this person has 5 small dogs. So that's a lot.
Are your dogs trained?
Lori, you can somewhat.
Okay. So so you're going to need help. So what I would say is excuse me. Sorry. What you're going to need is help. And so most of the photos that I'm trying to think of the ones that you saw. I edit leashes out of almost all of my photos. That Westie that was sitting on the tricycle was super well trained, so she didn't have a leash on. What you do is if you get people to help you, and you can have people kind of holding leashes and maybe kind of holding them up out of the way. Then again, it's kind of, I always start with easy. So you get the easiest dog in place first and then kind of build out. So start with the easiest, add the last one. You have to be ready to take the photo. And then as soon as kind of everybody is in place, make a sound and just kind of be ready for the shot. Does that help? Okay.
I think so. Yeah. And then we have a question about preparing your dog for a photo shoot. Are there times of the day or things to consider before you have a photo shoot with your dog? I mean, should it be in the morning, evening, before a meal, after a meal? Are those considerations that you need to make?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So I prefer, from a lighting perspective, I prefer morning and evening. And morning is basically right after sunset. So, I mean, morning is right after sunrise. And then evening is basically an hour and a half before sunset. So it kind of depends, are you a morning person or an evening person? Is your dog a morning person or an evening person? And then if your dog is treat motivated, then I would feed, if it's evening, I would basically feed him or her half the meal and then kind of use treats as the other part. It kind of keeps them motivated. And then if they're hungry, they're more willing to kind of work for food. The other thing is, what we say about dogs is it's the opposite of babies. You want them to be slightly tired and slightly hungry. I don't photograph newborns, but for newborns, you want them to be really tired and not at all hungry. And for dogs, it's just the opposite. If they're high energy, kind of trying to burn some of that energy before the shoot is a good idea. And generally not right before, because panting dogs, the dogs with really long tongues, is generally not considered to be super attractive.
Ellen, are there any locations in and around Loudoun County or just in the region that you prefer for photo shoots or that you would recommend?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on time of year. So I try to do shoots that are seasonal. So obviously the cherry blossoms, and that was done in Ashburn. I tend to like tall grasses, so kind of any place you can find that. I think Ida Lee is really pretty. I used to go to Morven Park. Morven Park requires anybody, not just professional photographers, but anybody that shoots there, they want to have a permit to shoot there. And not to get off on this, but they're a foundation. They don't get taxpayer money, and that's how they pay their bills. And so I do a lot of shoots at my house because I kind of have everything set up. So let me kind of think about some other locations. I think downtown Leesburg is also really cool, just because it's kind of the heart of our county and I like the architecture. So Rust Nature Sanctuary, also that's in Leesburg. That has some interesting backgrounds and it's not busy. if I'm going out, I like to go to places where there aren't a lot of distractions. So there's not potentially a lot of people or other dogs walking around. And then I would just say kind of look for backgrounds that you think are pretty. Balls Bluff is also great. And in April or late March or April, kind of depending upon what the temperature's like, the bluebells there are really pretty as well.
Thank you. Those are great suggestions. When it comes to taking photos, you know, we do take a lot of photos with our cameras, of course, and candids and things that are just in and around the home. But if somebody was looking to start to try to take some more professional photos with their pet, is there a camera that you would recommend that isn't too difficult to kind of find your way around, that, like, you know, a common person could use, but that would take really great photos?
So the place actually that I recommend going is Ace Camera. They're actually not terribly far from your office. They're on Loudoun County Parkway in Ashburn. And I'm familiar with my camera, but there's so many different brands of cameras. And what I like about Ace is if you go in there and tell them what you're looking for, they're not going to upsell you. They're not going to say, oh, you need this, you know, $6,000 camera with a $5,000 lens and all that. They'll tell you what you need. There's also a really good book called Understanding Exposure by Brian Peterson. And Brian spells his name with a Y, so Bryan. I can't remember if his last name is S-O-N or S-E-N, but it explains things kind of really simply. And the biggest thing when you're using a camera is to try to get it out of automatic mode, because if you want to be able to control what you do, to be able to freeze motion, you have to know how to do that. And that's very different than taking a photo of a dog where you want to blur the background. And I don't want to make things complicated, but if you're going to buy a camera and all you're going to do is put it on P, I feel like phones are probably doing a pretty good job of that these days, but learning just kind of some very subtle things will make photos, will make your photos a lot better.
Thank you. Ellen, I know that a lot of people bring more than just dogs and cats to you to be photographed.
Hopefully lizards. I love lizards. So
I kind of wanted to see what your, how you handle those special pets, like guinea pigs. I know that you've taken photographs of. I guess
the guinea pigs that showed up for Christmas last year, that was awesome for Paws and Claws, right? I can't remember their names, but like Pinot and Noir, it was right. And Moo was the dog. That was so awesome.
That's great. Yeah. So what are some of the pets that you photographed in your 10 years that are different than, you know, just a regular dog or cat?
So a lot of lizards. I think they're super cool. I have photographed Mandarin rat snake, which was it was awesome. They're not, well, anyway, I thought it was very cool. It freaked a lot of people out, but I thought it was neat. Rabbits, guinea pigs, an African gray parrot. I photographed horses. I think the thing is, if you're photographing animals that you're not super familiar with, do your research and kind of find out how you're like what the best way to photograph them is and kind of how to get their attention. Like I said, for horses, you throw like grass up in the air is good. Lizards are visual. I think snakes are visual too. And then it's also kind of learning like what it means when they're looking at you, because of the way like rabbits, I haven't photographed very many rabbits, but the way their eyes are set, they're looking at you, but it doesn't always look like they're looking at you. So, and it's kind of knowing what makes a good photo of them. So for example, when lizards are relaxed, or at least for chameleons, their tail will curl. Let me see if I can pull this photo up. I can't, I'm looking at a different
screen,
that's
okay. We
But
have someone in the webinar that's saying lizard photo tips would be great. So
yeah,
that and yeah, those exotic kind of animals that
they're just so. I just think they're so fun. So hang on, I gotta.
We'll give you a minute. And then if anyone in the webinar, if you have any questions for Ellen, again, please feel free to put them in the chat box, or if you wanted to just unmute yourselves and ask, that's okay too.
I found a cat photo that I can show you. I'm gonna need you to switch me back to
Yeah, I'm
host
gonna make
if you want me to show that. And if you leave that, then I'll put the lizard one up after.
Okay, great. All right.
Okay, so this is a cat. Are you seeing it? Okay. This is a cat that I photographed also for my book. And even though he looks like he's not happy, that's what his mom said, that is normal, his name is, that's what he looks like. And I think you can tell that he's relaxed because of the way he's lying. His kind of ears are up and forward. And you know, his tail is relaxed. I mean, what a gorgeous cat. And I walked into their house and that is their sete. And I looked at the sete and I looked at his eyes. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, how awesome is that? So that is also one thing that I look for a lot in photos, is some kind of type of, so if you were going to put him on a green couch, this wouldn't be a great photo. I think part of the reason it works is because his eyes and the sete are the same color. And then let me, I have to.
That photo is just amazing.
Yeah. The cat, oh, here's the lizard. So, so this is, oh, I'm spacing on his name, right? Vincent. Vincent is a chameleon. And you can tell that Vincent is relaxed because his tail is curled. Sorry, I'm pointing at it like you guys can actually see me pointing, but you can tell that his tail is curled. And so some of the tips for photographing lizards, I like to do things outside, but if they can't go outside, then you have to think about keeping them in their environment, because I know they need to be warm. Michelle, I'm gonna stop my share and make you the host again. Where are you? Oh, it's alphabetical. Okay. Yeah, okay. So if you're photographing kind of lizards in their environment and it's inside, you're probably going to have to use some type of lighting, and it can be like a constant light, meaning it doesn't have to be like a flash or a strobe, but you know, even like a flashlight or something like that can work. Or put them in a room with really good light, kind of close to the window, because if you don't have good lighting, it's everything's just going to be dark. And then the way to get their attention really is visual. I don't know that much about different types of lizards, so what I would say is kind of find out what type of lizard you're photographing, and then kind of figure out what works to get their attention. And I'm happy to, whoever asked that question, feel free to reach out to me afterwards, and I'm happy to kind of talk with you more about that.
Yeah, there's a follow-up to that question about the lizard photo. Did you enhance the colors at all with Lightroom or Photoshop?
I don't think so. But to be honest with you, it was a little while ago. I did this a couple of years ago. He was pretty bright and he was a little irritated. And when he gets irritated, and his mom is a vet tech, so she was there. Like this is actually outside Leesburg Vet Hospital. So I brought the chair because I knew what Vincent looked like. And again, I was looking for some kind of color harmony. But when they get mad, they get brighter. So I didn't do anything to make him mad, I swear. He actually liked me because she put him on me and then he clung, which I thought was super cool. But they get more brilliant when they get mad. So it actually worked out really well for the photo. So
we have a question about using flash outside. Do you use flash when you are taking photos outdoors?
Most of the time I do, but I use it off camera. So that means, it's not sitting on top of the camera, but it's on a stand kind of off to the side. And I use some type of modifier, so like a softbox, to make the light softer. I use off-camera lighting, I would say, except for action, and I don't ever use it in action photos. I use it in probably 98% of what I do. maybe even more. So.
We have a question about what is your philosophy on post-processing?
So I edit everything that I do. And I think kind of part of being a professional photographer is trying to, it's like part of the art process, but I'm not doing anything, I'm just making things pop a little bit more. So like leash removal to me is editing. Like if a dog is older and their teeth are yellow, I'm not going to make them super white, but I'm definitely going to kind of make them a little less yellow. If a dog is older and kind of has some bumps, that I always ask about whether my client wants those removed, but my goal is to get it kind of as right in camera as I can. But if for some reason, like there's a distracting element in the way that, like maybe it's a dog that's uncooperative, right? And I'm going to do whatever I can to get the best photo that I can. But if I'm also, it's really important to me to get the photo. So even I might kind of see something and I might want the dog to be kind of like a little over to the right or to the left. And I'll just take that out kind of later. But my goal really is to, what the photo kind of looks like in camera is what I want it to look like when I'm done. But there are definitely things that I do to kind of make everything kind of pop more. One thing that I pretty much always do is I'll just do a little bit to the animal's eyes just to kind of make them brighter, because that's kind of, for me, is one of the most important parts of the photo, but it should be subtle. I think if you can tell that you've done something, then you shouldn't do it. Except for leash removal.
Ellen, can you tell us a little bit more about your book, your latest book, The Tales of Loudoun County?
I'd love to.
And how you got people involved with that book.
Yeah, my girl. So, and so I think, yeah, I see Amy's still on the call. So I remember talking with Amy. I had this idea for this book, and I'd heard somebody in Australia had done a book like Tales of, I don't know, somewhere in Australia, Melbourne maybe. And I didn't know exactly what she did, but I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. And so Amy and I were out for dinner one night. I'm like, hey, I have this idea for a book. And she's like, oh, that sounds great. So, so we kind of talked about it. And so I just kind of wanted to get like a little bit of sense of what people thought. And I bounced it off a couple of other people too before I started doing it. But my goal with the book, from a fundraising perspective, I wanted to raise $25,000 to help 2 local animal welfare groups. And it ended up, I'm just slightly under 29,000 right now. But what I wanted to do was I really kind of wanted to show off animals throughout the county and tell their stories, as well as show off how beautiful our county is. I think Loudoun is really gorgeous. And so I started photographing in the fall. So the photograph that you saw of Dude and Bogey, Amy's dogs at Stone Tower, was obviously done in the fall. Did photographed all throughout the winter. We didn't get a ton of snow, but I did get a couple of snow shoots and then a lot of spring shoots. So I wanted to be able to photograph dogs. All the dogs or cats or kind of multiple animals have, I'm looking for one specific photo. Yeah, so here's a snow shoot. So, you know, you kind of get a sense for who Quincy is when you look at his photos. This is actually at my house. He came over and photographed him in the snow. So, and tell their stories, and then be able to kind of show the beauty and the history of Loudoun County at the same time, and kind of treat it as a fundraiser. And the way I got people involved was the first place I actually promoted it was at Paws and Claws in 2018. And then I did some, you know, Facebook promotions and just kind of let people know that I was doing it, and then had people reach out to me if they were interested in being a part of the book. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And are you planning on having another one, possibly another Tales of book?
Yes. So I had been thinking, although if you had asked me when I was like crazed last summer, I'd been like, no, just shoot me first. It was a lot of work. There's 211 different pets in the book. And so multiple photos. So that's like 1,000 photos that kind of need some level of editing, right? And so, yeah. and then putting obviously the pages together. I had been thinking about doing something kind of starting this winter, like winter of 2021, but I think with everything that's going on right now, I'll probably push it back. A lot of the way I raised money was with sponsors. Woofie's was a sponsor, and let's see who's so Amy's dogs were in the book, Leslie's dog was in the book, Caroline's dogs were in the book, and Lydia's dog was in the book. And I don't think you were working there yet, right? So yeah. So
people want to know how to buy the book.
So you can either call me or you can buy it on my website. You can call me. My number is 703-727-3368. Or you can get it directly through the website, which is talesofloudouncounty.com. And so Tales is TAILS. And a portion of the proceeds from every book sold also goes to those groups. I was hoping to get to 30,000. And I think I would have, except everything just came to a screeching halt a couple of weeks ago, or months ago, I guess at this point. But if you're interested in, if anybody is on the call and is interested in being a part of the next book, reach out to me. So call me or email me or send me a message, because everyone call me, so I've actually already started a list.
Okay, great. That's great to know. I've got some animals that I'd love to be in the next one.
So,
someone's asking, what is your favorite lens?
So I have two different lenses that I like. So for like traditional, like for portrait work, so if the dog is basically just going to be still, I have a so I'm a Canon shooter. It's a 70-200. And I usually am pretty close to the longer end of that, so at like 200. And the reason I do that is I'm standing further away. And again, without kind of getting into too much detail, I like the way that lens throws things out of focus, and where I stand and the aperture that I choose and kind of everything that impacts that. For action, I've actually been using the 100-400. And I like that because I can kind of be a little bit further away and still be able to track the dog. And because they move kind of so erratically, and sometimes they're closer and sometimes they're further, it kind of gives me more leeway.
Speaking of those action shots, Ellen, you've got some really great ones. They're like midair, beautiful. Is that something that like only you, a professional photographer, can do? Or how would one go about trying to get those shots? Maybe can you do that on an iPhone even?
So I don't know, because I'm not trying to sound like a jerk. I don't use it for, like, when I'm going out and I do action, I'm always doing it like deliberately. So I have my husband will go out and throw the ball, and I set it up because I want the backgrounds. So I want him throwing the ball in a certain direction so that my dogs are running where I can put light in their eyes and I know what's behind them. Action takes a lot of practice, and your success rate is going to, so meaning your hit rate of shots that are in focus is not going to be great. The more you do it, the higher that will get. And then there's certain things you have to know kind of about how to set your camera to make you to have a higher success rate. I can explain that, but I didn't know if that was just if it's an iPhone question or if that's a camera question.
It was kind of just a general question. So if you want to explain it, please feel free. Yeah.
So you need to set, so this is now from a camera perspective, right? You need to set your shutter speed really high depending upon how fast your dog is moving. I actually photographed Phil's dog. I can pull that up. I did that last week. I'm gonna not look at the screen while I'm doing this so I can show you this. So Phil's dog is really fast. And where is that? Hang on. And so depending upon how fast the dog is, but I usually shoot at 1/2000th, I can never say that word, of a second or higher. Can I do a screen share again, Michelle? Because you really want to be able to freeze motion. And so, So in order to get this shot, right, I knew, so the sun, so in order to get this shot, right, Fury she's a Belgian Malinois, she's really fast. So Phil is kind of off to the right. Obviously, the Frisbee is kind of moving to the left. And the sun was to the left. So I wanted her deliberately running that way. If you zoom in on this photo, you can see light in her eyes, which for me is really important. And you can also see kind of the other thing, right? Even lighting. And so I didn't want her running through patchy lighting. So what I'm doing the whole time is I'm tracking her with my camera. I have it set at a really high shutter speed, and I'm doing high speed continuous so that it is basically firing the whole time. I'm gonna go back to you, Michelle.
That was a gorgeous photo.
She's a gorgeous dog.
Yeah.
And she is, so Lola, I think Lola is insanely fast, and Fury smokes her. It's great. Because
Wow.
they've played together before, and like she turns it on and I'm just like, wow. Yeah, she's fast.
Are there any special tips, Ellen, that work specifically for iPhones or phone cameras and not cameras?
For action or for?
Well, this question is just a general one, I guess. If you have any special tips that work, those tips work specifically for camera phones,
So
phone cameras, rather than a camera in and of itself, I guess.
So I don't actually really know. The one thing that I would say is kind of if you're using your iPhone, it's really important to make sure that you kind of, that the whole setting is really evenly lit, because your phone is going to have a much harder time kind of reading brightness and darkness. And without getting into too many details, like our eyes can see something like 25 different stops of light, but our cameras can only read I think it's like 10. And so that's kind of it's huge difference. So when you're looking at a scene, you can see the dark stuff and you can see the light stuff, and it all has detail to you, but your camera can't do that. And so if you have your animal kind of in even light, then that I think will help. And then I'm sure you're doing this anyway, but tap on the, like, the dog's face to kind of do that focus, because that's also going to impact the, that's how it's reading light. It's reading light off of that focus point. And so I have 2 black cats. And so if they're kind of lying near a sunbeam and I tap the cat in for my phone, I can actually see the light change in the back of my camera.
That's a great tip. So we are coming up at the top of the hour now, and
Okay.
Just wanted to ask you finally how people can, what the website is if they wanted to go to your website and get more information.
Thank you. So my website is ellenzanglaphotography.com. So it's ELLEN. Oh, you can see my name up there. ZANGLA photography.com. And feel free to call me as well. I'm happy to answer any questions. I love what I do, and I love talking about what I do. It's fun for me when people are kind of excited, and I really do. I think everybody should have great photos, and I'm happy to kind of help you, help you get better if you have any questions about that.
Great. Thank you so much, Ellen. We wanted
Thanks, Michelle.
For kind of rounding out our webinar series. This has been so great and informative. Your photos are gorgeous.
Thank you.
And we hope we will be seeing you very soon. I'm sure we will.
Yes, for sure. So, and thanks for having me, and thanks for hosting this. This is great, and fingers crossed that we're all back together for Paws and Claws in November.
Yes, definitely. Fingers crossed.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.